In this video, we're going to go through the basic functionality of iPicture. Now, iPicture can be used for two different processes. One is convex machining and the other one concave machining. Convex machining would typically be used if you were doing a project on wood or some sort of solid surface. Convex machining would be used if you were going to be doing a machining project on something that is of a semi-opaque nature, something like plexiglass or Corian. So in this video, we're going to cover convex machining. And so this would be for a woodworking application if you're going to do a photograph or a 3D grayscale model in wood or in a solid surface material. So you can see I've got my iPicture icon on my desktop. I'm just going to double click and going to run that application. So as you can see, I've got iPicture opened up on my screen. And there are two functions in iPicture. One of them will be covered in other videos, but if you click on File, you'll see that we have two options. One is open an image file. The other one is opening a G-code file. If you open the image file, it's going to be a JPEG or a PNG file, a photograph, or a 3D grayscale model. Opening a G-code file is only used if you're going to be converting a G-code file that's been created in ArtCam, and you're going to convert it to a G file for use on your iconic machine. There's more details on those applications on the videos that are related to the use of ArtCam Express. So in this case, we're going to be opening an image file. So I'm going to go to File, I'm going to open an image file, and I'm going to go to my Downloads folder where I have a photograph of Abraham Lincoln. So you can see here's a photograph of Honest Abe. When I bring this photograph into the software, you'll see that, first of all, by default, it's created these units in millimeters, which I can change to inches. So I've changed it to inches, and you can see that this is the size of the image that I found. So it's a 17-inch roughly by 20-inch image. So this is the width, or the left to right. This is the height, the top to bottom. The last number is the depth that we would machine. Now, this is not in any way connected to the image size because obviously there is no depth to a photograph. We would establish the depth based on parameters of our choosing. So I'm going to change the project size here to 8 inches, and you'll see that as soon as I change the X coordinate, it automatically changes the Y coordinate. So it maintains the aspect ratio for the project. The last coordinate, which is the Z range, is not changed. As you can see, it's set by default at 0.118 inches. And typically when I'm doing these applications in wood, I tend to keep the depth very low. In this case, I'm going to change the depth to about 50 thousandths of an inch, or 0.05 inches. And the reason for that is if you think about what we're going to be doing with iPicture, what iPicture does is it takes a grayscale image, and it can be color or black and white, doesn't really matter, but it converts the grayscale into machining depth, or the color density into machining depth. So if you look at the picture of Abe, you'll see that it's got darker areas where his hair is, and the color of his suit, down here in his beard, up in his eyes, and then there's some lighter areas, his shirt, some of the background, and so on. So what it's going to do is it's going to machine the darker areas deeper, the lighter areas less deep. And so what we don't want to do is we don't want to create this really strange perspective. For example, his hair being machined very deep into his head. For example, if I set the maximum machining depth here at 1/2 inch, it would machine essentially a hole in his head where the hair is, and it wouldn't look very appropriate at all. So what I do is I set the depth at 50 thousandths of an inch. Now, one of the options that you can see that iPicture offers us is to invert the light-dark areas. And so if I click on that, it will invert them. In other words, all the lighter areas will be machined deeper, the darker areas less deep. This is somewhat subjective based on what your personal preference is. I tend to do photographs in solid surfaces without inverting the light-dark areas. And here's the reason why. Once I finish machining it, essentially at 50 thousandths of an inch, the photograph is going to be basically etched into the wood. At that point, what I'll do is I will use stain to bring out the detail. So I'll add a dark stain to, say, a lighter colored wood. I will wipe it off the high surfaces, which would be, for example, his face, his shirt, the background, but I would let the stains absorb into the deeper machined areas, which would be, in this case, his hair and his suit. And so it tends to create a little bit of that contrast that I'm looking for. Now, other folks have done inverting the light dark areas and liked the result, and it really is subjective, whatever it is that you like. The next setting that we have is what we call scan steps. And what scan steps basically are is the amount of detail that it's going to get out of this image. So the way this is going to machine, it's going to machine it in what we refer to as a raster-based machining strategy. So the machine is going to move from left to right. It's going to machine across, basically moving up and down at the various levels of depth based on the grayscale conversion. And then it's going to move just a little less than 8/1000ths of an inch. If by default it's set at 0.7874, and just so you understand why it's an odd number, in millimeters that translates out to 0.2 millimeters. So it's going to move just a little less than 8/1000ths of an inch down the y-axis. Then it's going to move across the x-axis again from right to left, and then another 8/1000ths of an inch, and then back left to right, and so on. And basically going back and forth like a dot matrix printer until it machines the entire surface area. So the scan steps at 0.007874 is the default setting, and I tend to leave it at that. If you set that number higher, for example, say at 0.01 inches, then what will happen is it will machine the project a little bit faster, but you're going to lose a little bit of detail, and you may get some machining lines. Set the number a little bit lower, say at 0.005 or maybe even 0.003. Tremendous detail, but very, very long machining times. As a general rule of thumb, I find that 0.007874, that default setting, tends to work quite well. The tool type, as you can see, there's a drop-down menu with 6 different tools. Your machine comes with a 1/32 conical V-bit, which is the one that's listed here, GVR 1/32. That's the only tool that I ever use when I'm using iPicture software. Now, you will see that there's also a 1/50th V-bit as well. The other two are just metric equivalents to these tools. If you do have access to the other tools, then you can use them, but iPicture only recognizes the tools that are in the software, so you can't use a tool that's not listed in the software directory. So I'm going to use the tool that came with the machine, which is the 1/32 GV radius bit. Feed depth per cycle, you see it set at 0.945 by default. All that feed depth per cycle means is that based on the maximum depth, which we have set at 0.50 inches or 0.05 inches, it's going to machine. Feed depth per cycle is the is the maximum depth it will machine with each pass. For example, if I set this at 0.050 inches, that means it's going to machine this project in one pass. If I were so inclined to want to do it in 2 passes, then I would put the feed depth per cycle at 0.025, which means it will machine 0.025 inches, then go back to the top and machine the entire project a second time to get us the maximum depth. Generally speaking, I never use more than 1 pass until I'm exceeding depths of more than 1/4 of an inch. After 1/4 of an inch, then I can, depending on the substrate, I may decide to machine in 2 passes. The general rule of thumb is that with any wood, softwoods or hardwoods, about 1/4 of an inch maximum feed depth per cycle is all I'm looking for. If I'm using something very soft, like a high density sign foam or something like that, then I may want to go a little bit deeper, but generally speaking, with woods or plastics, 1/4 inch maximum is good. The origin position, you'll see that there are 5 options, all 4 corners in the center. By general rule of thumb, I typically use the center as my origin position when I'm doing these iPicture images. And here's the reason. The image size that you see here, you notice it says size of the project. This is not the material size. This is the size of the image area that it's going to machine. Typically, I want my wood or my substrate, whatever I'm machining, to be larger, in this case, than 8 by 9.3 inches. And the reason is because I don't want the machine to machine to the outer edges of the material. Because if it machines to the outer edges of the material, then I have a potential to hit either the fence on the left side of my machine, if I'm using an iconic machine, or I could hit clamps either at the top or bottom on the right-hand side, if I'm machining out to the outer limits. So typically in the project like this, for example, I might start with a material size of 9 inches by maybe 10 or 10.5 inches. And then I'm going to set my XY origin position in the center. I'm going to put a set of crosshairs on the material, and I'm going to jog the tool to the center to match. That way, when I'm done, I've created an image that's dead center in the middle of my material. And I find that desirable. If I don't want that border at the end, I can always take it off with a table saw and get rid of that outer border. But typically, I want to make sure that I've got a little bit of an edge around the outside perimeter so that I'm not machining to the outer edges of the material. It's a much safer way to go. And then lastly, I'm going to click Preview, and you can see it's just asking, confirming that we want to create a preview. Now the preview has a limited function. It gives you a basic idea of what you're about to see when it machines the project. It doesn't give you high resolution 3D simulation like you would see in ArtCam or maybe some other CAD software program, but it's going to give you a basic idea of what you can expect to see when it creates this project. So you can see down here it's telling us that it's checking the tool, so it's going to take a few seconds for it to generate this tool path, because it's essentially creating the tool path during this preview portion, because it has to figure out all of the motion that it has to take in order to create this project. So you can see there's the workpiece preview window popping up, and it doesn't even look like anything is there. If I push my left mouse button down on the workspace and rotate it, and then use the roller on my mouse, I can zoom in, and as I zoom in, you'll begin to see the image start to show up. And I can rotate this in any direction that I want. I can also push my left and right mouse button down simultaneously and move to a different section of the image, and then zoom in and see what I'm looking at. And you can see that it's created it essentially as we described. It's machining the darker areas deeper, lighter areas less deep. So as you look at the suit, you can see that the darker area of the suit here is machined deeper, the lighter area is less deep. So it's kind of a limited function, the preview, but it does give you a basic idea of what you can expect. If you're over machining it, it's going to be very, very noticeable. And then the last step in the process is to click Convert. And it will take, again, probably about 30 seconds with an image of this size to actually check the tool and output the tool path. So this is going to output a .gee file once it completes this process. And this would be a file that would go directly onto the flash drive. And of course, the flash drive would go right to my Iconic machine ready for machining. And you can see it's just completing the conversion process now. And we will call this Lincoln. And you'll see that we save that as a G file. So that can go straight to my flash drive, onto my machine, and ready to machine. So that is the basic functionality of iPicture for a convex machining project.